The wind bites sharper than usual on this December morning in 1944, cutting through the thin fabric of Private Thomas Keller's uniform as he stamps his feet against the frozen Belgian soil. The checkpoint outside Bastogne is a simple affair. A wooden barrier painted in hasty stripes, a small shelter cobbled together from ammunition crates, and two American soldiers huddled against the cold, their breath forming clouds in the pre-dawn darkness. Thomas pulls his collar higher as another vehicle approaches, headlights dimmed to narrow slits per blackout regulations. "Papers," he calls out mechanically, the word nearly lost in the rumble of the Jeep's engine. The driver, dressed in American officer's uniform, smiles and produces documents with practiced ease. Everything looks standard. The signature, the stamp, the photograph matching the square-jawed face peering up at Thomas. In the passenger seat, another man in uniform waits silently, collar turned up against the cold. "Where you headed, Captain?" Thomas asks, following protocol despite the freezing temperature making his fingers numb around his clipboard. "Fuel depot at St. Vith," the man replies, in flawless, unaccented English. "Division headquarters needs updated supply reports before the morning briefing." Thomas nods, about to wave them through when something tugs at his memory. A warning from yesterday's intelligence briefing. German commandos in American uniforms infiltrating Allied lines. He hesitates, scanning the man's face again. Could this perfectly ordinary-looking officer be one of them? How would he even know? What question could separate a genuine American from a well-trained imposter? The answer comes to him in a flash of inspiration that will alter the course of countless lives in the hours to come. The Jeep's engine idles as frost forms on its hood, a clock ticking in the silence between them. Around the checkpoint, the Ardennes forest stands dark and watchful, hiding secrets that will soon explode into one of the war's most desperate battles. Neither man knows it yet, but this moment, this simple exchange at a forgettable backwater checkpoint, will ripple through history as one of the small human turning points that changed everything. "Just one more thing, Captain," Thomas says casually, leaning forward. "How are the Dodgers doing this season?" What happens in the next 5 seconds will determine whether this Jeep proceeds into American lines or whether alarms will shatter the pre-dawn quiet. A simple question about baseball that no one expected would become a matter of life and death. The driver's expression doesn't change, but something flickers behind his eyes. A momentary calculation so brief Thomas almost misses it. The man smiles, confidence unwavering as he responds, "Doing well." They won their last game. The answer hangs in the frigid air between them, seemingly ordinary yet suddenly heavy with significance. Thomas returns the smile, while his right hand slowly moves toward the holster at his hip. December 1944. Baseball season has been over for months. The last Dodgers game played back in early October. No American would make that mistake. "Step out of the vehicle, sir," Thomas says quietly, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. The driver's smile vanishes as his hand darts toward what should be a standard-issue sidearm, but is actually a Walther P-38, German military issue. Shots crack through the silence of the forest. When it's over, 2 German commandos lie dead beside the checkpoint, their immaculate American uniforms now stained with blood. Inside their Jeep, maps of American positions, recognition signals for the next 3 days, and a radio tuned to German frequencies. One simple question about America's pastime had unraveled an elaborate deception that could have cost hundreds of lives. Word spreads quickly through the American lines. By nightfall, checkpoints across the Ardennes front have implemented the baseball test. Casual questions about hometown teams, popular players, recent scores. No matter how perfect the enemy's English, how authentic their uniforms, this cultural knowledge proves impossible to counterfeit completely. Who would have thought that knowledge of home runs and batting averages would become as crucial as ammunition in the coming days? As German forces mass in the darkness beyond American lines, preparing for what will become known as the Battle of the Bulge, a new weapon enters the Allied arsenal. Not one forged of steel, but of shared cultural touchstones that no amount of intelligence training can perfectly replicate. Staff Sergeant William Hayes expected trouble on the night of December 16th, but not like this. Intelligence reports had warned of possible German infiltrators, yet nothing prepared him for the convoy of 5 American trucks approaching his checkpoint outside Malmedy with all the correct markings and documentation. "We're carrying ammunition to the 82nd Airborne," explained the lieutenant in charge, his accent pure Midwestern, his posture relaxed and confident. "Got orders to deliver before daybreak." Hayes studied the paperwork. Everything appeared legitimate. The convoy soldiers looked cold and tired, just like his own men. Their uniforms were regulation issue down to the last button, their weapons standard American M1 rifles. Nothing seemed out of place, except for a nagging doubt that Hayes couldn't shake. "You boys catch the Cardinals game before shipping out?" Hayes asked conversationally, remembering the new protocol implemented after yesterday's incident. The lieutenant's smile never faltered. "Sure did. Shame about that last inning." Hayes nodded slowly. "Funny thing is, I grew up next to Sportsman's Park in St. Louis. Been to every home game since I was 8. Don't recall any Cardinals games being played in December, Lieutenant." The moment crystallized into perfect clarity. 5 trucks loaded not with American troops, but with German commandos from Operation Greif, specially trained by Otto Skorzeny to infiltrate Allied lines. The lieutenant's hand moved toward his pistol, but Hayes was faster. The ensuing firefight was brief but intense, leaving 3 Germans dead and 7 captured. Inside the trucks, American uniforms and equipment sat in neat piles, enough to outfit 50 more commandos. Maps marked locations of fuel dumps and ammunition depots behind Allied lines. Most chilling of all was a list of phrases and cultural references with German translations. An infiltrator's guide to American casual conversation. Baseball facts were notably absent. "They prepared for everything except the World Series," Hayes later told military intelligence officers. "Knew our ranks, our slang, even how we hold our cigarettes, but not who pitches for the Yankees." By dawn, new orders went out across the Allied front. Checkpoints were to quiz all personnel on American sports, entertainment, and everyday culture. The perfect English of the German commandos had proven dangerously effective, but their knowledge of Mickey Mouse, Betty Grable, and Joe DiMaggio couldn't match a lifetime of American immersion. Major Robert Collins at 1st Army Headquarters compiled a list of suggested questions. Who was married to Betty Grable? Name 3 of President Roosevelt's cabinet members. What is the color of the Coca-Cola label? Simple questions to Americans became impenetrable barriers to even the most thoroughly trained imposter.
Als die Offensive crashed through the Ardennes like a thunderbolt, diese kulturelle Passwörter bekamen als important wie physische Defensen. Reports fluteten in von German-Kommandos in amerikanischen Uniforms, ertempen Troops zu Missdirekten, change road signs und eben geben falsche Retreat-Orders. Jeder wurde ultimativ bedroht von kulturellen Blindspots, no briefing document könnte füllen. Unfähig, den Chicago Cubs Homefield zu nennen oder Recall zu Wonding Kentucky Derby. How strange, Soldaten reflektierten in Foxholes und at Roadblocks, dass deren keimhafte Minnungen von Baseball-Diamonds und Radioshows nun einen invisiblen Schild gegen Infiltration formten. Die Dinge, die sie took für granted, Who Sang White Christmas, What Cereal Came with Which Toy Prize, bekamen Secret Weapons mehr effektiv als jedes Codebuch. In dem Chaos der Battle, wenn Uniforms, Dokumente und even Akzente könnten falsifiziert werden, was remained uniquely American, war ein shared kulturelle Memory, no enemy könnte perfekte duplizieren.
The knowledge carried in the mind of every American soldier, accumulated from years of Sunday games, movie theaters, and breakfast tables, proved impossible for the enemy to counterfeit completely. Behind the snow-covered trees, the German offensive continued to build momentum, but its secret weapon of perfectly disguised commandos had met an unexpected cultural firewall. As shells began to fall on American positions across the front, soldiers manning checkpoints added cultural questions to their defensive preparations. Against bullets and tanks, they had weapons, but against infiltration, they now wielded baseball statistics and Hollywood gossip. Lieutenant David Abrams huddled in the basement of a shattered Belgian farmhouse, rain dripping through the ceiling as he briefed his military police unit. 24 hours into what was becoming known as the Battle of the Bulge, confusion reigned across the American lines.
Reports von amerikanischen Kommandos in amerikanischen Uniformen hatten Spread like Wildfire, kreieren eine Atmosphäre von Suspicion, das drohte zu paralysieren Kommunikationen. Trust no one without verification, Abrams told his men, their faces illuminiert durch den wenig Glow einer Kerosinlampe. They speak perfect English, they have our uniforms down to the last detail, und their papers look genuine. So wir implementieren Operation Homefront immediately. He distributed sheets von Paper, Listen Dutzende von Fragen über amerikanischer Kultur. Sportteams, radio-shows, comic book characters, state capitals, popular songs. Ask at least 3 questions before allowing anyone through und macht sicher, der Questions nur ein Amerikaner würde known. Private Henry Wilson reißte seinen Hand. Was if sie studied up on this stuff? Die Germans sind thorough. Abrams nodded. That's why we're focusing on regional knowledge. Ask about local sports teams from their supposed hometown.
Ask about neighborhood landmarks or local celebrities. No amount of study can replace growing up somewhere. The strategy proved effective immediately. At a crossroads near Stavolo, MPs stopped a jeep carrying what appeared to be 3 American officers. Their papers identified them as staff from the 28th Division, their English flawless, their uniforms impeccable. But when asked to name the Philadelphia streetcar lines that ran past Independence Hall, they hesitated just long enough. Caught 3 of Scorzini's men right there, Sergeant Frank Miller recounted. One of them actually admitted during interrogation they'd been given general information about major American cities, but nothing about local transportation. Said their commanding officer considered it too detailed to be useful. By the 3rd day of the offensive, captured German commandos revealed the extent of their preparation. Special training camps had been established weeks earlier, where English-speaking German soldiers learned American slang, practiced American walking styles, and were drilled on everything from how to chew gum to how to hold a cigarette. They were issued genuine American uniforms taken from prisoners, given American watches, eyeglasses, and even chewing gum. Some carried genuine American identification documents obtained from captured soldiers. What they lacked was the cultural memory that comes from actually living in America, the accumulated knowledge of which baseball team recently traded their star pitcher, what the popular radio shows said last week, or which actress just married which actor. This information, constantly changing and deeply ingrained in actual Americans, proved impossible to fabricate convincingly. It's like they memorized a snapshot of America, observed Lieutenant James Parker after interrogating a captured commando. They know what America looked like in the briefing room, but not how it lives and breathes. German Lieutenant Karl Muller, captured near Malmedy while posing as an American military policeman, expressed frustration during his interrogation. We studied your equipment, your tactics, your language. No one told us we would need to know about baseball teams that aren't even playing in December. The cultural interrogations spread beyond checkpoints as paranoia gripped American units. Soldiers began quizzing each other informally, finding reassurance in shared cultural touchstones. Who pitched the last game of the World Series? What was Superman's girlfriend's name? What's the next line to As Time Goes By? These questions formed an invisible web of American identity, separating friend from foe when uniforms and documents could no longer be trusted. Reports kamen ein von across der Front. German commandos caught redirecting artillery units, attempting to take over fuel dumps und in einem Fall näherlich succeeding in assassinating einen amerikanischen General before being exposed by inability to name the capital von Oregon. Each capture reinforced the strategy of cultural verification, creating einen improvisierten Defense-System gegen Infiltration. The Germans, learning of this method, attempted to adapt by providing their commandos with more cultural information. Captured documents revealed hastily prepared briefings on American sports teams and entertainment figures. But such knowledge, divorced from the context of having lived it, remained superficial and detectable to Native Americans who could sense the difference between memorized facts and organic cultural understanding. In the snow and confusion of the Ardennes, amid the thunder of artillery and the crash of tanks through frozen forests, this invisible cultural wall became as important as any physical defense. The question became not just, do you know the information, but do you know it the way an American knows it? A distinction that proved impossible for the Germans to overcome. Captain Michael Donahue crouched beside a wounded German commando captured near St. Vith, trying to stem the bleeding from a bullet wound while waiting for medics. The man wore a perfect American uniform, carried genuine American identification, and up until 10 minutes ago had been directing traffic at a crucial intersection, sending American reinforcements down the wrong roads. "Why did you volunteer for this?" Donahue asked, pressing a bandage against the man's shoulder.
"You must have known the risks." The German, pale from blood loss but still defiant, replied in his perfect English, "Because I lived in New York for 12 years before the war. I was the perfect choice." "Then how'd we catch you?" Donahue asked. A flicker of frustration crossed the commando's face. "Baseball. I never cared for baseball. Lived in America for years but never bothered with the game. Who would have thought that would mattered?" This pattern repeated across the battlefield. Many of Skorzeny's commandos had indeed spent time in America before the war, as students, businessmen, or immigrants who later returned to Germany. They spoke flawless English, understood American customs, and could navigate American social norms convincingly. Yet even they had gaps in their cultural knowledge that became apparent under questioning. Ein Deutsche, der in Chicago für 5 Jahre couldn't name the major streets and landmarks, but faltered when asked which local beer was served at Cubs games. Another, who had studied at Harvard, could discuss American literature, but couldn't name the current popular radio shows. Their knowledge was frozen in time, missing the continuous flow of cultural references that active participation in American life provided. Military intelligence officers began compiling a database of effective cultural questions categorized by region, social class, and age group. Questions about regional food specialties proved particularly effective. Germans who had memorized baseball statistics might still not know what a proper Philadelphia cheesesteak contained or how Bostonians preferred their clam chowder. The cultural verification system saved countless lives as the Battle of the Bulge intensified. Near Bastogne, a German commando team dressed as American MPs attempted to redirect an ammunition convoy away from the surrounded town. Their plan might have succeeded had a young driver from Kentucky not become suspicious when none of them recognized the lyrics to "My Old Kentucky Home." For the Germans, this invisible barrier proved more frustrating than physical defenses. Captain Friedrich Berger, captured while attempting to infiltrate an American headquarters, explained during interrogation, "We were prepared for your weapons, your tactics, your technology. We were not prepared for your culture to become a weapon against us." German intelligence officers frantically attempted to provide their remaining commandos with more cultural information, but the challenge proved insurmountable. Cultural knowledge isn't just facts to be memorized, but a complex, living system of shared references, inside jokes, regional variations, and constantly evolving trends. No briefing document, no matter how thorough, could replicate the cultural instincts developed through actually living as an American. By Christmas Day, as the German offensive began to lose momentum against stiffening American resistance, Skorzeny's commando operation was effectively neutralized. Of the roughly 100 English-speaking Germans inserted behind American lines, most had been captured. Their perfect English and immaculate uniforms had gotten them through checkpoints initially, but their cultural knowledge had ultimately betrayed them. The baseball question that first exposed a spy had evolved into an entire system of cultural verification that proved impossible for the enemy to overcome. In the snow-covered hills of the Ardennes, as artillery thundered and men fought and died, this unexpected cultural battlefield produced its own kind of victory. The irony wasn't lost on the American soldiers who manned those critical checkpoints. The very aspects of American life that military training tried to suppress, regional accents, hometown pride, knowledge of popular entertainment, became crucial weapons in the arsenal of defense.
The cultural diversity that sometimes divided Americans in peacetime became their strongest unifying force in war. General Patton's Third Army finally broke through to the besieged forces at Bastogne the day after Christmas. As relief columns entered the shattered town, soldiers exchanged not just supplies and ammunition, but the latest baseball statistics, movie gossip, and radio show catchphrases. Information now recognized as valuable for security as well as morale. In the aftermath, military intelligence officers interviewed dozens of captured German commandos, trying to understand the planning behind Operation Greif and how to defend against similar infiltrations in the future. What emerged was a picture of meticulous German preparation undone by the inability to replicate lived cultural experience. "We studied your language, your equipment, your military procedures," explained one captured German officer. "We could reproduce all of these perfectly. What we could not reproduce was your childhood, your hometown, your shared cultural references. We did not understand that these would be what truly identified an American." Major William Stevens, who conducted many of these interrogations, later wrote in his report, "The Germans attempted to create Americans from the outside in. Perfect uniforms, perfect documents, perfect language. What they could not create was Americans from the inside out, the accumulated cultural knowledge that comes from actually being American." This distinction proved decisive. As American forces pushed the German offensive back in January 1945, new security protocols incorporated the lessons learned. Cultural verification became standard procedure at checkpoints, embedded alongside document checks and password systems. Training courses taught soldiers how to craft questions that would reveal cultural imposters, not just facts that could be memorized from a briefing book, but contextual knowledge that required actually having lived the experience. The baseball question that exposed the first spy evolved into a sophisticated system for detecting infiltrators through cultural knowledge. This system would continue to prove valuable as Allied forces pushed into Germany, where last-ditch German efforts to infiltrate Allied lines were repeatedly foiled by cultural verification questions. Perhaps most remarkable was how this security measure strengthened rather than weakened unit cohesion. In a military that brought together Americans from every region, social class, and background, the cultural verification process created unexpected bonds. Soldiers from New York found themselves explaining the subway system to comrades from rural Kansas. Bostonians taught Californians about the Red Sox. These exchanges, born of security necessity, reinforced the diverse yet unified nature of the American force. "It's funny," reflected Sergeant Thomas Keller, the young man who had first used the baseball question at that fateful checkpoint. "Before the war, I might have had nothing in common with some city boy from Chicago or a rancher from Texas. Now we quiz each other about our hometowns, our local teams, our favorite radio shows, all to make sure we're really American. And in doing that, we've come to understand what being American actually means." The German commandos, with their perfect English and flawless uniforms, had inadvertently revealed something profound about identity. Being American wasn't about documentation or appearance or even accent. It was about sharing a cultural consciousness, a collective memory built from thousands of shared experiences, references, and traditions. This was what no amount of intelligence training could counterfeit. In the final months of the war, as Allied forces pushed deeper into Germany, military historians began documenting the cultural verification system that had emerged spontaneously during the Battle of the Bulge. What had begun as a simple baseball question had evolved into one of the war's most effective security measures, one that recognized culture itself as a form of identification more reliable than documents or uniforms. Today, these stories from the snow-covered checkpoints of the Ardennes remind us how our shared cultural experiences bind us together in ways we rarely acknowledge. The casual knowledge we accumulate throughout our lives, team loyalties, regional foods, entertainment references, forms an invisible web of identity that defines us as surely as any passport or identification card. The next time you find yourself discussing last night's game or quoting a favorite movie, remember those young soldiers in the frozen forests of Belgium who discovered that knowing who pitches for the Yankees could be a matter of life and death. In their improvised defense against infiltration, they revealed something timeless about human identity, that we are defined not just by how we look or sound, but by the cultural memories we carry within us. Perhaps there are echoes of this lesson worth considering in our own time, when identities can be manufactured and information manipulated with unprecedented sophistication. What remains authentic and imitable, then as now, are the lived experiences that shape our cultural understanding, the invisible markers of belonging that no algorithm can perfectly replicate.